Jay Paterno, the author of Paterno Legacy, Enduring Lessons from the Life and Death of My Father. It's fall and it's football, and I'm assuming you're excited, but I'm also assuming there are mixed emotions.
No, I'm excited. Obviously I'd like to be coaching, but, those things that'll come with, in time. But, in the meantime, got this book done, got it out there, and I'm awfully proud of what we've been able to accomplish with it.
In reading the book, I thought to myself, this must have been two things for you. Emotional, obviously, but difficult as well in the sense that I would be so angry if I were in your shoes, even still today, and I'm angry and I'm not in your shoes, because the Penn State leadership failed so miserably.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. One of the things about the book is I don't try and put myself into rooms where I wasn't, so to speak, where I don't know why they, I can't tell you exactly why they did what they did. I could probably make pretty good guesses, which is what leads to incorrect stories. But the point is, the decisions they made were absolutely horrible as it related to Penn State. The outcomes were very, very bad for Penn State, and it's unfortunate because they really put a lot of things on Penn State that, quite frankly, were not Penn State's responsibility, and really put a stain on Penn State. There's still people who've heard of the Penn State scandal, and there is no Penn State scandal here.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The actions of one man.
It is amazing. This has never been a Penn State scandal, except for the fact that the Free Report and Mark Emmert and the cowardice at Penn State at the time, in terms of leadership, allowed it to become a Penn State scandal. Did the entire way this came down simply shock you at the way Penn State allowed the Free Report to be accepted as fact, which it never was, and the leadership to allow Mark Emmert to slap them silly?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was one of those things that the story just got stranger every day. A good friend of mine and I refer to this as, the white Bronco. And here we are 3 years later, and the white Bronco still has gas and it's still driving. I mean, it's just it just continues to get stranger. I mean, here 2 weeks ago, the NCAA issued guidelines as to how athletic departments should handle allegations of sexual assault by student athletes or members of the athletic department. And those guidelines are exactly what Joe Paterno, exactly what Penn State's athletic department did. And they can't even see the irony in this and the fact that they're contradicting themselves. They're punishing Penn State University for doing exactly what they are saying people should do. It just makes you scratch your head and,
Jay Paterno is our guest.
You look in the mirror, you just sit there and go, how does this work?
Well, let me give you an example, Jay. The book is Paterno Legacy, by the way, folks. It's a wonderful read if you want to get a recap firsthand of what went on at Penn State a few years back in 2009 through 11, through 12, through 13, through 14. Now we're up to 2014. Jay, at the University of Missouri, they had allegations of rape by football players against a female swimmer. She reported them. The athletic department did nothing about it, didn't report them to anybody, didn't investigate as Title IX law requires. The girl killed herself, and no one at Missouri has suffered a consequence of any sort. No one from the NCAA has come in and fined the University of Missouri $60 million. And then we find out that prior to that, 4 years prior to that, there was a running back who was accused of assaulting 4 different women on campus, including a female soccer player, and her scholarship was threatened by the soccer coach if she said anything. And again, nothing has happened at the University of Missouri. How did this happen at Penn State? What were there people that had your dad's unequaled record of excellence is the word to use here, and doing it by the book and doing it the right way? Was the jealousy so strong that that's the overriding emotion here?
I don't know if it's that. I mean, I think there was definitely, my dad had told Graham Spaniard in the summer before 2011 season that this was going to be his last year. And they had put some things, they had talked, and I'm not going to get into who they had talked to, but there had been some discussion with some guys about becoming the next coach and what the staff would look like and that kind of thing. And those things, the president and my father had kind of decided that that's how it was going to go. And I think there may have been some trusty resentment towards the fact that, hey, why aren't we in the middle? Why aren't we part of this discussion? And gave them the authority to, that may have been part of it, and this may have been their chance to take a shot and fire him and kind of remake this program and the university in their image. And not that Joe ever tried to make the program and the university in his own image. I mean, Joe was a very humble human being, despite what some people may think. But, you know, I'm not sure. Again, I don't want to try and guess as to what or state anything as fact as to why they may have done what they did. But, you know, it's you look at the way Syracuse University handled it with Jim Boeheim, you know, with their allegations against Bernie Fine, who at the time was a current coach. I mean, people forget that Jerry Sandusky was not a coach when Joe Paterno was given a report about something. But, you know, Syracuse stood behind Jim Boeheim. He went out and had a press conference, and the media went away. And Penn State, this story broke on a Friday. Nobody went in front of a camera until Wednesday night, which, as you know, in the media, I mean, one day later is too long. 128 hours later, forget about it. The first thing they do is fire two people, which to the whole world was an admission that there must be something even bigger here that we don't have. So nobody went away, and they offered up the university, and you know they'll end up making amends for it personally, believe me.
Jay Paterno is with us. Jay, you mentioned going in front of the media. Your father wanted to have a press conference as soon as this all hit the fan, and Penn State stopped him. Fill us in on that. Why did they stop him, and why didn't Joe just say, you know what, too bad, I'm having one?
Well, two things happened. On Sunday morning, President Spanier was told by John Surma, who was, and by the way, not the chairman of the Board of Trustees, he was the vice chairman, and was not in charge of the university, and was in no way authorized to do some of the things that he would do. He told Graham Spanier, you are no longer to speak to this university. On Tuesday, Joe's press conference was literally imminent. The media was lined up outside, ready to go in. Joe had decided he was going to go in, answer the questions, and get this thing done, you know, talk about it, address it, and handle it. And John Surma again canceled the press conference, again, without any authority to do so. So I think this whole story would have come out very, very differently if people were able to get out there and put the facts out early on in this case rather than have the facts spiral out of control. And you know, John Surma has proven great leadership. I mean, he ran U.S. Steel's stock price into the ground and was fired as the CEO, and he really just took Penn State's reputation and ran into the ground. So, you know, he's got a heck of a track record.
Man, why didn't Joe say, you know what, too bad, I'm having it anyway?
Well, I think that's what people understand. I mean, Joe had great respect for authority. I mean, you know, people say he was the most powerful guy in the state. He ran that university. You know, Graham Spanier will tell you every time Joe and he had a meeting, Joe went to Graham's office out of respect for the fact that Graham was the president of the university and his boss. And so, I mean, he was not going to be insubordinate to, and again, at that time, we didn't know who canceled the press conference. We had no idea who called it, and we were trying to find out because the rumor started that they canceled the press conference and they were going to announce Joe was fired any minute. But there was no communication from them to us at all.
You know, this inability to handle things correctly by the Penn State administration, I'm not talking about Graham Spanier, I'm talking about the Board of Trustees. And then we have this free report, which was so bogus, and all people had to do, and I kept advocating, if you don't read the free report, then don't comment about Penn State. Because if you didn't read it, you don't understand what's in it, and the balderdash and the crap that was in it. Someone as close to your father as Phil Knight didn't read it. And
correct.
He then, even in the foreword to your book, says, well, then I did read it. And then it was, triple, double, and all of a sudden, he took the name of Joe Paterno off one of his buildings on the Nike campus, and he writes in the foreword that Jay, meaning you, of course, has said to make me feel better that Dad would have wanted you to take the name down off the building. He says, that made me feel better at first, but not for long, because I believe if the situation had been reversed, Joe Paterno would have left my name up, lynch mob be damned. Forgiven or not, I cannot escape that I was, at least for a time, one of them, meaning the free people and the idiots in the media who ran a false narrative. Is Phil Knight going to restore the name of your dad to that building?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to take a little more time again, I mean, one of the things that happened when the Free Report came out and Nike issued that statement, I had a feeling it was going to happen because it's a publicly traded corporation. He's one of a number of board of directors. And when it came out, you know, a friend of mine called and said, I said, guys, everybody just calm down, okay? Live to fight another day. And whether it goes back up or not, you know, I think the forward is a very, very powerful statement by Phil Knight. I think for, you know, unfortunately in this day and age, people who have notoriety or people in positions of power are very, very hesitant to ever admit a mistake. And when I asked him to write the forward, I didn't give him any parameters. I told him, I said, look, I'm going to talk about you taking the name off of the book. And he said, I can handle it. I sent him the book. He read the book. He sent the forward back. And the part you read, first time I read, I couldn't help but crying because for him to stand to write this forward and say, I know if the roles had been reversed, Joe wouldn't have done it to me.
That's strong.
Those people, I mean, that is a powerful, powerful statement. So we'll see over time. But, you know, right now I'm thrilled with what he put in that forward. I think everybody that, you know, I've had people email me and said I couldn't get to the forward without crying. I said, well, get ready because you will again in this book at some point.
There's a lot.
I thought it was very. I mean, it's very admirable. And the other thing that I mentioned in the acknowledgments at the end, because it kind of happened after the book was mostly written. Al Clemens, who was a member of the Board of Trustees in November of 2011, made a statement at a Penn State Board of Trustee meeting saying we were wrong, and I'll always regret being part of that. And I thought that took tremendous courage, and I admire him for saying that. And a lot of people should be saying the same thing.
But, Jay, it's so difficult to get the word out. We've tried here for 3-4 years on our show, and we've done a good job of it, I believe. I know John Ziegler has done some of it. I know other people have. But ESPN, in my opinion, has been the most culpable of all in running a false narrative. And I think what happens in today's media is when Louis Freeh has a press conference and says, here's what happened, here's the report, no one read it. They read the Cliff Notes version, and they run with the narrative because they were reporting on it an hour after it was handed out. Well, you couldn't have read the 260 pages in an hour, and that's where it all went south.
Well, no, right. I think when we get discovery in these lawsuits with the NCAA, I think there's going to be some real eye-opening things in there because originally we were cooperating with them. You know, I sat in front of the free group. You know, I sat in front of them for an hour and 48 minutes. I answered 3 or 4 questions about Jerry Sandusky, and the rest of it was all about institutional control. And that was in December of 2011, and I knew right then and there where it was headed. I talk about that in the book very specifically. But that said, we were, you know, our lawyer attorneys were talking with them and said, look, we'd like the chance to answer any allegations or assertions you're going to make about Joe with the documents that we have. And we're more than happy to do it. And Freeh said, no, just turn over everything you have. We said, no, we want to be able to address certain assertions and allegations you're going to make. And they said, okay, we have plenty of time. This report's not going to come out to the end of August. And it was going to be the middle of August. Well, somewhere along the way, in June, they decided it was going to come out All-Star break, which was a master plan in terms of them for PR. They leaked some emails about 2 weeks before, and I said to Dan McGinn, who was one of the guys working with us on this, I said, it's coming out the Thursday All-Star break because there's no football, basketball, hockey, or baseball being played. And whatever he says will get run over and over and over and over again, and it will set in cement. And it's exactly what happened. And he went up there and said some things and that were absolutely not true and have been proven not to be true by the people who are actually prosecutors of the case as it relates to my dad.
You know, examples of the media. Colin Cowherd said that Joe Paterno should have known that Sandusky had been to a grand jury in 1998. Well, there was no grand jury in 1998, right. So that's an absolute falsehood. But yet, once it's out there, it's hard to get it back. Cowherd also asserted that Paterno should have fired Sandusky in 2001. Well, of course, he would have had to have rehired him because he wasn't working there in 2001. I mean,
well, I think what happens is you know, there's such a rush, and you know, in the dedication of the book, I talked about, you know, the pressure to be first over being right, and you know, I was on Colin Cowherd's show a couple of weeks ago. It was a very, very different situation and very, very different line of questioning than there was a year and a half, 2 years ago, because I think there is some recognition of the fact that maybe, he asked me really good, hard questions, but allowed me to answer. And you could tell there's a little different attitude about it. Mike Francesa at WFAN in New York, very different after reading the book, and had read the book and had read the Free Report. And you could tell his opinion now that they've studied it. Bob Costas, who I know has been on your show and talked about it, after he read the Free Report, came to very, very different conclusions. And, he's got a copy of the book. So there's a lot of people that are starting to look at this and reevaluate. There's some that won't. I mean, Christine Brennan apparently seems that she'll never kind of revisit this. But, you never know.
You know what?
Stephen A. Smith, in February of 2013, changed some of the things that he said after I kind of filled him in on some of the facts. So it just takes, you got to keep prodding and prodding and prodding.
We destroyed Christine Brennan on this show because she hadn't read the Free Report, which none of them did, by the way. And one of the few that ever admitted he didn't was Bob Costas, and Bob's a friend. And I asked Bob after his initial comments, and here's what happened with Bob Costas. He lands in London off a plane for the Olympics, and he's immediately called by the producer of the Today Show and given a skeleton version of the Free Report, and then he responds to it. And I said, Bob, you didn't read it, did you? He said, no, I didn't have a chance to. And I said, you got to read the whole thing. And when you do, I guarantee you, knowing you, you'll not have that opinion. And he didn't have it. And to his credit, Bob went back and read the whole thing. Unfortunately, I would guess 99.9% of the media have never read that report to this day.
Oh, I would guarantee that's probably the case. And they, like I said, they set up a perfect storm. They released the report at 9 o'clock, have a press conference at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, Louis leaves the stage, and he never answers another question about it again. Obviously I know he's had a car wreck, and I wish him a speedy recovery. I don't mean to be disrespectful if someone's in the hospital right now, but as it relates to this situation, it was an ideal thing. And, part of his contract with Penn State, he was supposed to come address the Board of Trustees and answer questions about it. He has never done that. We've offered, every time we've gone on to talk about it, we've offered, Bob Costas had a show where he had our attorneys on, and some people talked about the report we issued. They invited him on. He wouldn't come on. Mark Emmert wouldn't come on. They wouldn't come on and answer questions about it. And I think that is a very telling situation where, if they don't want to talk about it, there's a reason.
Yeah, what are you hiding?
They're standing on quicksand.
Yeah, what are you hiding from if you won't come on with Bob Costas, and he has the people that wrote the conflicting report of the Free Report, Dick Thornburg and Robert Clemente, who was an FBI profiler, and Thornburg, who was a former attorney general, who wrote a report conflicting everything that Free said, and you won't come on and defend your position. But why does America, and I'm telling you, Jay, I'm pointing at ESPN because they continue the false narrative, and they won't do. This is a perfect 30 for 30 opportunity, as Bob Costas suggested to me one time. Why won't they do that?
Well, I think I think they'll get there at some point. I think there's no question about it. We had actually had some discussions with them about doing a documentary on Joe's life, and then when the Free Report came out, we just felt it wasn't the right time to really do this. We had to, and I think the book will help push that ball down the field a little bit more. It's amazing. I've had people email me and said, you know what, I read your book, and after I read it, I now understand how Father was scapegoated. I understand how this went terribly awry. Unfortunately, every action, one of the things that's allowed some people in the media to maintain that Free is right, to maintain that narrative, is that there's been no pushback at the university. I mean, that's a very telling thing to a lot of people. Well, they say, well, if this is true, well, the university picked 26 victims, $60 million. The vast majority of them had nothing to do with Penn State and weren't Penn State's responsibility. But to the world, that looks like you're telling everybody that 26 kids were. I mean, people are stunned when they understand that, the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of the things Jerry Sandusky was convicted of have absolutely nothing to do with anywhere near Penn State. It's not university actions have kind of pointed them to believe.
Jay Paterno is our guest. The book is Paterno Legacy. Jay, it amazes me. This all starts, of course, because of a conversation that Mike McQueary had with your dad McQueary has changed that story 4 different times at the very minimum. I don't know what he's told the last time. Do you believe that he actually witnessed a sexual assault by Sandusky in 2001?
I've never talked to him about it, so I couldn't tell you what he said to anybody, and that's by design that I haven't talked to him because we were kind of, none of us knew that conversation had occurred. It became something we were all aware of because we all got questioned by the police. And then we were kind of asked, and I never had a conversation with Mike McQuarrie about it. I never had a conversation with my dad about it. So I don't know what was said. I mean, I know there's a lot of speculations of what's said. I have not read all the testimony and all the things from every court case. I haven't read every word stated in court by the victim and Mike McQuarrie and everybody, so I can't tell you. And I want to be careful. I don't get into speculating as to what someone said and what someone didn't say without really knowing exactly or having heard it written or about.
I know in the book you say that your dad simply wanted to find the truth. He wanted to find out the truth. Do you think he believed that Sandusky was guilty of these types of things?
Oh, I think, yeah. I think I don't know, because when he died, obviously the trial had not happened. And my dad was somebody who believed in innocence until proven guilty. But the conversations I had, it appeared that he believed that the evidence that he had seen, the presentment and all that kind of thing led him to think, how could somebody do this? I think it was still very hard for him to get his head around it, as it was for all of us. I mean, people say, well, your dad was old. Well, I'm not old. And it's hard to fathom anybody doing this, even though it's in the news, especially somebody that you know. So, obviously my dad died before he had the benefit of seeing what happened in the courtroom. So, I don't want to really get into hypothetical what he may or may not have thought of, but certainly his first concern up till the day he died was that the victims of whatever happened, that justice be done and the truth come out, and that's really what he wanted. So, I mean, that was really what thought.
Here's something that's always struck me as odd, and of course, when it comes to the media, nothing strikes me as odd, but your dad is a football coach, was a football coach for all of his years, was a great teacher, and was a great human being by everyone's account that knew him. Experts in the field of child pedophilia looked into Jerry Sandusky's background, allowed him to adopt foster kids, allowed him to run this charity for kids, for wayward kids. They looked into his accusations in 1998, and they came away with nothing. They came away with no reason to prohibit him from adopting these kids, no reason to prosecute him, in fact, exonerated him. And yet your dad gets a phone call from Mike McQuarrie, and your dad's supposed to be an expert in child pedophilia?
Oh, well, I mean, what people will tell you is he was the most powerful man in the state. That's the argument they give you. Number one, that's not true. Number two, he coached football. Okay, whether he won 0 games, 10 games, or 409 games, okay, it sits equal to the eyes of the law. But people say, well, he was Joe Paterno. We expect more out of him. Well, the truth of the matter was, Joe was not a mandatory reporter under the law in 2001, yet he still reported it. And he reported something he didn't necessarily know to be true. But it was an allegation made by somebody, and he followed the law exactly as he was supposed to, and all that he was allowed to do. Unfortunately, the whole mob of people with pitchforks and torches was really riled up by Noonan, who was the state police commissioner, who made the comment that Joe failed his moral obligation. He had a moral obligation to do more. Absolutely not true. The moral obligation you have is to report exactly the way the law tells you, simply because of the fact that people say, why didn't he call Jerry? Well, if you call the guy who's going to be accused of that,
right,
and investigate this, they can destroy evidence. They can contact victims and say, keep your mouth shut. People say, why didn't he try and do this? He had no subpoena power. He had no police force. He had no ability to investigate. So, that argument about Joe should have done more really rings hollow when you sit back and look at it rationally, which I understand is difficult for people when it comes to cases of child sexual abuse. I get that. But you have to be fair. One thing Fred Berlin, who was an expert in this field at Johns Hopkins University, said, in we must not make the treatment of adults, unindicted adults, collateral damage in our pursuit to do what's right for these kids. And that's what happened to my dad.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me that while people claim he was so powerful and he could have done more, they want to hang him for his comment, in hindsight, I wish I could have done more. Well, that's a big statement, but it doesn't mean that he did anything wrong.
Correct, but that's not how the world's, that's the environment that we're in right now, and that's why everybody in the room that day told him not to put that in the statement. He said, I'm going to put it in the statement because that's the truth. I wish I'd been more aware of these issues or been able to spot something. I've made this argument with people all over the country. I say, anytime you're around in New York City, there's signs all over the place. If you see something, say something. Well, we all know that if somebody leaves a car running in Times Square, that's a little suspicious. Or if somebody leaves a package under a seat in the subway in New York City, that's a little suspicious. You know what you're looking for, so you can say something. When it comes to this, we don't know what we're looking for most of us. And certainly, my dad coached in college, which is 18 to 22-year-olds. He wasn't in childhood education. He wasn't, he wasn't a person that was trained would even know what to look for in these situations. But because he went to football games, we ascribed certain extra human powers to him. But he was the first one to say, whether it was, hey coach, what do you think is going to happen Saturday, or what's going to happen with the NCAA and these rules, or we'd ask him certain things. He'd say, guys, I wish I was on mission like you guys think I am. And all of us left the meeting and went to our offices and looked up what the hell our mission meant, first of all. And then once we figured out what we meant, we knew what he was saying. Look, I'm not all powerful, I'm not all seeing. But people want him to live in that. And it's just, and I think what's important, looking back historically, you can't judge people's action in 2001 based on what we know in 2014 and what they did not know in 2001. It's a very unfair standard.
Well, and like I say, when the experts don't recognize it, how is your father or anyone at Penn State and their administration supposed to figure out what Jerry Sandusky may or may not be up to? This was such a tragedy on so many levels. The last days of your father's life, I know in the book you go into very explicit detail, your young son reading the poem If by Rudyard Kipling to Joe at his bedside. Try to give our listeners a sense of the emotions during that week.
Well, he left the house about 9 days before. He went to the hospital about 9 days before he died, maybe in 10, 11. My math's probably off. But he left on a Friday and then died a week later on the Sunday. So it was 9, 10 days, whatever it was. But up until Thursday night, everything looked like it was heading in the right direction. We were really encouraged, and I remember saying, this is good when he gets that house, gets a good night's sleep, and resting, and when he get his treatment, he's right in the same building. And then Thursday night, the doctor grabbed me in the hall on my way out, and he said, Joe's really up against it right now. And, when your father is 85 years old and battling lung cancer, and the doctor says he's up against it, you don't have to ask what he's up against. And then I just kind of brushed it off and said, he always comes back from me, so I'm not worried about it. Friday morning, my sister called, and I knew that it was probably, I spent the next 48 hours, I spent 46 of them in the hospital with him. And it was sad. He laughed, and we made jokes, and he laughed, and he was alert. He just had a ventilator and couldn't talk. And, it was peaceful. And the great thing about it, it's never obviously, when I say great as in the thing I'm most thankful for, is that there was nothing left unsaid through those. But watching the grandkids go in, I wanted to talk to them. Watching my mom sing to them. All these little moments that I'll never forget. I mean, just it was very, very tough to write about sometimes. Some points, and then I felt really good that I had. I let my mom read it. Said, "Are you okay with everything I've written here?" And she said, "Yeah, I am. I really am." And mostly because I wrote it mostly because I wanted people to understand the love that his family had for him, and a lot of other people had for him. Probably the most challenging moment of the entire thing was Saturday night when a student website reported he had died, and CBS Sports picked it up and ran with it. And, then I had to go, meet my dad and go issue a tweet basically saying he was still alive. But, it was, when the time came, I felt comfortable that I let hands out.
Jay Paterno is our guest. The book is The Paterno Legacy. Jay, so many people in this country are misled by this lawsuit against the NCAA, Louis Freeh, of course, and the Freeh Report. They think it's the Paterno family and the Paterno family alone. This lawsuit has been joined by faculty members, by former Penn State players, by coaches. This is an all-encompassing group of plaintiffs, including members of the Board of Trustees led by Anthony Lebrano. This is not Jay Paterno, Sue Paterno, and your family against the NCAA. This is a lot of members. This lawsuit encompasses a lot of people who want the truth out and who want the NCAA to be accountable for what they did, not only to Penn State and the Freeh Report for what they did to your father.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. But it's easy to write the Paterno family lawsuit. That's the easy, lazy way to cover that lawsuit. But as you mentioned, it covers a bunch of people. It covers members of the Board of Trustees who were trustees when this decision, the consent decree was agreed to, the Freeh Report was agreed to. It covers trustees that were not consulted in making the decision to accept the NCAA sanctions, which they should have been. It covers former players who feel like their time at Penn State and what they did has been tainted by this. Up until this happened, when our former players walked in to a job interview and they said, where'd you go to school? I played football. You played for Joe Paterno. That was a plus. Now they walk in, whether it's a job interview, whether it's a sales call, whether it is any kind of business relationship, when they say they played football at Penn State, there's a different connotation because of what was wrongly asserted in that report. Not to mention, as one of the guys said to me, my son looked at the media guide and said 2005, 0-1. And he said, Dad, I thought you won a bunch of games. And he has to explain to his son. So, there's a lot of things involved, but you also have faculty members who feel that the university has been, strained, or, the name of the university reputation has been kind of tarred and feathered by this. You have former coaches. Everybody forgets that, there were a lot of people in the media right away saying that all the coaches knew about Gary University, and the university did not allow us to respond as coaches for 2 weeks to those things, which did a lot of damage to our reputation. So, this thing, as I say in the book, to understand, obviously the people that are most hurt by this are the victims of the abuse. But having said that, acknowledging that this bomb that went off threw shrapnel all over the place and did untold damage to a lot of other people doesn't take away from the fact that they are the primary victims, but there are a lot of the people that were damaged by this. And this lawsuit is a representation of a lot of different groups that feel that the Freeh Report and the NCAA did unpunished.
And not only the lawsuit, but the way the media has handled this, as you mentioned in the book, Christine Brennan says she knew everything she needed to know before reading your report. She didn't even read the Freeh Report. So this is someone at USA Today. This shows you the standards of USA Today. She didn't even read the Freeh Report, and we took care of that in our interview with her. And she claims she doesn't need to read the report of Dick Thornburg and Mr. Clemente refuting the Freeh Report. So people that have that closed mind are going to continue to do this. How do you fight that from a PR standpoint, and how does Penn State fight it other than the lawsuit? What other recourse do you have?
Well, I think the lawsuit is the big piece, because obviously, people say, oh, why are you suing? Well, whether, you got to be able to separate Penn State, the institution that we love, from the administrators who took actions that did damage to Penn State. So by going after this, we're really doing something for Penn State, not against Penn State. But I think what's important to understand is one of the reasons that this has to take place, and I wish it didn't, one of the reasons that these lawsuits have to take place is because without subpoena, without depositions, we're never going to have no one's ever going to explain why they did what they did. We're never going to find out what was in the correspondence between certain people that was going back and forth, and why they took what was the gold standard, in academic and athletic integrity and excellence. Because keep in mind, we weren't just graduate or players and losing. The last 7 years of his career, Joe had the sixth best record in the country on the field, and we were the only program that graduated over 80% of our players and won over 77% of our games. So they took what was the gold standard of a student-athlete-centered program, athletic department, across the board, every sport, and threw it under the bus. And no one's explained why, and we would like those answers, as would a lot of people.
And,
and this is the only way they're going to do it. They're not going to willingly come out and say, oh, yeah, well, we decided, because they're going to have to be forced to do it in subpoenas and depositions.
And I always say that, all of this began with Mike McQueary's comments, and your father sent that to the proper people because it wasn't his place to judge guilt or innocence, and he did the right thing. And if I were his lawyer, I would have said the same thing. Don't you dare comment beyond this. I wouldn't have let him do a press conference, but he wanted to anyway. But in McQueary's case, I know there was a wide receiver job opening up 2 days before that shower episode took place, and Mike McQueary wanted that job. Do you think that had anything to do with this?
Well, I don't know that, but I know this. I mean, anybody who believes that Joe wanted to cover this up, the easy cover-up would have been to say, hey, Mike, we just had a job open up as a coach. Why don't you become the wide receiver coach and keep your damn mouth shut? That's a cover-up. Not, hey, we'll report this to the athletic director and the vice president, and the athletic director will then go to the second mile and tell them about it. That's not a cover-up. If you think that was an attempt at a cover-up by Joe Paterno, you assume two things about him. Number one, he's corrupt, which 61 years of his professional life have proven he is not corrupt. And you assume he's stupid, which, again, 61 years of his professional life prove he is neither corrupt nor stupid. So I think it's important to note that there was a wide receiver job open in 2001 when this happened, not necessarily to gauge anybody's motives as it relates to what Mike may or may not have been going to jail for, but more so as it relates to the fact that this was not an attempt to cover up. That's the easy cover-up.
Yeah, and
that's what if you were covering this up, that's what you would have done.
Yeah, I'm taking this to the proper authorities above me, and by the way, you're not getting that wide receiver's job.
Right, and he didn't get it, and he goes, don't even and I'll give you a little further insight because I was on the offensive staff at that time, and Joe said to us, look, get some candidates and let's talk about who you want to hire. He never once said, would you guys consider hiring Mike McQueary in 2001? Did not put his name out there, did not throw it out, which tells you that there wasn't anything in the back of his mind where he was going to try and cover this up or use it to try and, get Mike's silence on this. Because obviously if you want to silence, you don't direct him to other people. And that's what Joe did. He directed him to Tim Curley and to Gary Schultz, and then, obviously, as I mentioned, went to the second ballot. So clearly, you're not looking at a situation where people said, let's hide this.
Jay, I've kept you for a long time. We'll let you go here real quickly here. But throughout all of this, I looked at your father and I thought, how in the world does Joe not just get angry about this? And he never at least allowed it to come out in the public that he was furious with what took place. How was he behind the scenes? Was he just furious at what they did to him?
No, I mean, the only time I saw him where he was really kind of ired, or his ire was piqued, was in December when Rod Erickson did an interview with USA Today, and basically says, we want Penn State to be known as a great research institution, not just a football factory. Because he said, we are a great research institution. We're known as a research institution, and we are not a football factory. We never have been one. And that's when he kind of took it upon. He said to me, we can't let that be the story here, and we can't let them put this on the athletic department because this is not an athletic department problem. And he was right. He was absolutely right about it. And so that's the only time I really saw him where he wasn't angry, he wasn't venomous. It was just, I can't believe they'd say that. And especially a guy like Rod Erickson who'd been around as long as he had and absolutely knew it wasn't true. Absolutely knew it wasn't true. Anybody who thinks that my dad would put the welfare of children, welfare of his football program on the welfare of children, or build a program that was simply football factory, just doesn't know. I mean, it's absolutely, you can't ignore what someone's done for 80-something years of their life, and then assume that in one moment they're going to turn and throw it all away.
Jay, as you look back on it now, Graham Spanier, Tim Curley, Gary Schultz, do you think anything will come of those lawsuits, those criminal proceedings?
It's been so long. I mean, it's, you just kind of want to, I'm not a legal expert, but, I'll say this about those three guys. I mean, I had a lot of professional dealings with them, not with Gary, but certainly had some interaction with Graham Spanier, had a lot of interaction with Tim Curley, and, none of them ever been, it's been nothing but honest with me. But so what and when, and I think everybody will be relieved once they actually get a date and get after it, and see what happens. Because I think there's that's where the last piece of the puzzle really kind of resides, in the criminal trials, and that day comes, and we'll know more. But as it relates to my dad, I do know this. I mean, the prosecutors in the case, despite what Louis Freeh maintains, the prosecutors had access to all the evidence. I've repeatedly stated that Joe was honest and forthcoming and cooperative and was in no way involved in an attempt to conceal or cover up. So, for me, as it relates to my dad, that book's closed.
You better believe it. Hey, Jay, great stuff. Great book, The Paterno Legacy, folks. We didn't even get into the football stuff, and I apologize for that, but I know there's great football stories in here, as well as the elephant in the room stories, and it's a wonderfully touching book. I would imagine that it was at the very least something that helped you mentally and emotionally.
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I think it's when my dad died so publicly, public viewing and public memorial service and all those kind of things, and having to deliver the last eulogy at the memorial service that week really was. I didn't really have a chance to sit down, just kind of cry and let it out and realize what had just happened. So this book kind of helped me. And I think one of the things you touched upon as it relates to this book is, this was Joe was a big figure as it related to college football. And there's some funny stories in there about, Coach Myers from Alabama calling the house. There's stories about sitting in Walter Payton's living room recruiting his son and listening to the two of them talk. And it just goes on and on and on. There's stories about Urban Meyer in there, and there's stories about, Joe recruiting Jim Brown, and, Al Davis trying to, there's all these different people that when I started writing this book and these stories started coming up, I was like, God, this guy knew everybody. Even to the point where in the chapter on politics, there was a day in February of 1988 where George H.W. Bush, the Vice President of the United States, is riding around in a car that wall. There's just so much stuff on. And one of the things I want to is this Sandusky stuff is part of it. But this is really a book about lessons that anybody can use and take in any walk of life.
Great stuff, Jay. Hey, thanks so much, and it's been our privilege and our honor to help uncover this story. This lawsuit is going to be the final truth about this, and until Louis Freeh and Mark Emmert answer questions under oath, I wouldn't take a word they say as anywhere near believable.
Absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with you, and that day's coming. So, Tolstoy said the greatest warriors are time and patience, and I got patience. I'm nothing the best, and I got time. I'm still a young man. I'm going to live to see this one through.
And by the way, I might add that as the former director of the FBI, as a federal judge, Louis Freeh has disgraced the legal profession with his conduct here in not responding to questions. He's an absolute disgrace. That's my point.
Well, I won't disagree with you.
All right, Jay. Thanks so much for the time, and we appreciate a great book, and thank you for that.
Thanks, Jay. Take care.
And tell your mom hello.
Will do.
Thanks,
All
Jay.
right. Bye.
That's Jay Paterno, the author of Paterno Legacy, Enduring Lessons from the Life and Death of My Father, and he addresses everything in that book. Let's take a break because, as you know, when I do a good interview, I go long. Let's do that. We'll get caught up, and we'll come back on the Pabst Blue Ribbon Gateway Buick GMC King Scored right after this.